alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and Happy New Year! If you're listening to this time shifted, of course, which probably most of you will, it may not be New Year's for you now, but this podcast, this episode is for the spirit of the New Year's, and joining me for this special occasion for 2020 is J Daniel Sawyer. Welcome back to the podcast, Dan.
Thank you, and talk about a missed opportunity. If they're listening to it time shifted, it's obviously Happy Hangover.
Well, this will be a few days after New Year's. It's the first podcast in New Year's.
I don't know. Some people get really serious about their New Year's. Hangovers can last for months.
Oof. No wonder nobody gets their resolutions done.
There's a reason the tax day is in April. It takes that long to sober up.
Oh, oof. I'm glad I don't. I'm not a heavy drinker, but I get punished if I do anything. So there you go.
Yeah, not much of a drinker myself either.
Well,
I've been to parties, man.
But what are we both? We're both writers. So,
which is worse?
It's true. You don't. I mean, some say writing will drive you to drink. Others it's just a replacement. It's an intoxicant that replaces alcohol.
No. As Lazarus Long said, writing is nothing to be ashamed of, but do it in private and wash your hands afterwards.
Words to live by. Okay, so Dan, remind people who you are and the sort of books you have out there and podcasts.
I am a mystery, science fiction, and horror. Mystery and science fiction mostly, with a little fantasy and horror around the edges. Writer, and I also do quite a bit of nonfiction. I am the host of the Everyday Novelist podcast, and several podcast fiction books that go out from my site at jdsawyer.net. The Literary Abominations Uber feed is the one where you can get it all except for the Everyday Novelist, because that really does come out every day, and that would swamp the feed. And
it's a lovely podcast. Yeah, I love that one. As a writing nerd, that's of course my angle.
But I do fiction, education, the occasional bit of philosophy and punditry, and mostly I'm interested in the way the universe works, and that sort of makes it into everything, and particularly the way humans manage to survive in a universe this hostile.
And a hostile universe indeed. Yes. I mean, it's no wonder that the world seems always, it's never, the world's not at peace at any point. That's not a thing, right?
No.
I mean, even if you could, even in a global society, you can't say the whole world's peaceful, even part of it, really. Anyway.
Well, and we're now at the end or past the end of the most peaceful period in human history, so it's only going to get more interesting from here.
And the Chinese proverb comes to mind: "May you live in interesting times." Not proverb.
That's exactly the kind of interesting I mean.
Yes, exactly. So, interesting times, 2020. What's coming up for you in 2020, Dan? I'm kind of curious about what sort of stuff you're looking at publishing, specific, stories and stuff. Because you're back at writing again, and we talked a bit about this last time you were on, which was back in November, I think. Yes, back in NaNoWriMo. But I'm curious where you're headed at the moment.
Well, the first order of business is getting some omnibuses out, because I have a lot of books, and some people like to read a lot of them at once. So my mystery series is going to get collected into 3 omnibuses for the first 9 books, not book 9 of which is coming out later this year, both in print and in ebook form. We're also finally getting my catalog into audio, where it should have been all along, because I built my audience from a podcast. And then I've got, coming out this year, I've got 2 juvenile fiction books, a new mystery, 2 nonfiction books, and Partridge in a Pear Tree.
What's that partridge about? No, okay.
Well, you always got a budget for the partridge, because it's a bird that sits overhead and unpredictably craps on you. If you
Bird
don't
of
plan for that-
Damocles. The Bird of Damocles.
That's right, the Bird of Damocles.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, a lot of you're doing the juvenile fiction, which I mean nowadays we call that young adult, right? Basically, or is it a little different?
Well, it's a little different. I mean, it's the same marketing category, but it's a different approach to young adult fiction. Young adult fiction tends to be, frankly, it tends to be written for adults with children as the protagonists.
Yeah.
Juvenile fiction is what young adult fiction used to be before kids stopped reading it. The Harry Potter books were juvenile fiction. Heinlein's 12 Scribner books were juvenile fiction. The Hardy Boys, Tom Swift, Judy Blume's books, that's juvenile fiction. It's for the same age range as young adult fiction is ostensibly for, but it actually is designed to be read by that age range instead of just being for adults who are infatuated with nostalgia.
Well, that's a pretty harsh. No, but fair enough. I'm not saying I disagree with
you. No, that's what the marketing.
Yeah, I see your point though. Yeah,
says.
Fair enough. Yeah, okay.
The real shift there happened with Twilight and the Hunger Games. That was where the market really turned.
Yeah, that's where the romance kind of takes center stage there.
Well, not just the romance, but the it's a whole bunch of really subtle stuff.
Okay. We may not have to go into all that, but feel free to go into it a little bit. Yeah.
Well, the juvenile fiction is primarily concerned with becoming and coping with adulthood, growing into responsibility. Young adult fiction is more just stories featuring kids that are of that age, but not necessarily interested in the coming of age arc. It may be part of it, but it's not the focus of it.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And that is a pretty easy distinction to make. Pretty simple distinction that makes a lot of sense. I can understand it, so it must be pretty simple. But I was thinking, have you ever read Great Expectations, the Charles Dickens, I believe?
Oh gosh, 20 years ago.
Okay, so in that book, I read it back in college, so a few years more recently than you, but like 10 years ago. But that's an interesting one because I think that one is pretty close to walking the line there, or maybe that is actually juvenile proto juvenile fiction. I think, but Mark Twain was also kind of like that too.
It might be
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain stuff is definitely the Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn definitely juvenile fiction.
Okay, they're kind of similar to Great Expectations, even though the stories are nothing alike. But anyway,
right, yeah. and the tradition comes from a juvenile. The tradition of the juvenile actually comes from a German novel format called, if I can pronounce it right, The Bildungsroman.
Yes.
And so there's a literary tradition that comes through the German immigrants into the U.S. that Mark Twain picked up because the German immigrants tended to go towards your neck of the woods, and then they also scattered throughout the South and mixed in with the Scots descendants. And so, anyway, that gets us off into esoterica.
Indeed, but that's okay. It's interesting stuff, even if it's only tangentially related to really anything. To writing.
But yeah, anyway, juvenile fiction is something that I think needs to make a comeback. It's becoming an adult is very difficult. You suddenly go from being taken care of and inoffensive to having the ability to create and destroy life and wreak large amounts of havoc and having to be responsible for yourself, especially now in a world where everyone's trying to keep you so safe you can't figure out how to actually handle this vast power that doesn't make any sense to you. And I think in a world like this, juvenile fiction needs to make a comeback because it's sort of a virtual reality way for kids to experiment with responsibility that they may be denied in real life.
Yeah, no, that is important stuff too. I mean, the more I think about things like the because I grew up basically with young adult fiction, the proto young adult, like the modern young adult, like the later Harry Potter books are kind of like that, but also Orson Scott Card.
Card would be juvenile. Like Ender's
really?
Game
Okay, Ender's Game would be juvenile. Okay. So maybe I had more of that in my background than I thought. Okay. So I read a lot of Card when I was younger, and not all of that's juvenile fiction, of course.
Like I said, the real break point where the character of it changes and the target audience really changes is in the late aughts.
Yeah, the early
stuff written before that tends more to follow the even if it's called young adult, tends more to follow the juvenile type of novel structure, and stuff written after that has a much more adult sensibility in mind.
Yeah, that's interesting, especially because I remember I think the third Hunger Games book came out when I was a senior in college, and a lot of people I knew were reading it. I read it back then. So yeah. Anyway, so as far as your plans for the new year, I have some as well, and I'm going to share them here because they're still kind of amorphous, right? They're not. I don't have as many plans that are concrete because I have a bunch of secret work to do that I'm not going to be talking about here, but it will take time. And time is the writer's currency when creating work. So I'm hoping to come out with 3 or 4 or 5, let's say, epic fantasy books for my current series, the Demon Hunter series, next year, because one of them is almost done. So hopefully I can get that to 5 or 6 books before the end of the year. I'm kind of intimidated by that fact because these books they're getting bigger. I'm only on book 2 and it's already ballooning compared to book 1. A little bit, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be trying to control it for size and control the sequels for size, because it just keeps, like a lot. But I think epic fantasy can make do with very big books. It's just a matter of, do I have time to write a bunch of very big books and to keep up my publishing so people don't forget about the first few. That's also just the independent publishing lifestyle is a little bit difficult when trying to write books twice as long as the average indie book.
Well, then you just shelve them until you've got a larger block to drop, and then you boom, 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 boom.
That's what I should have done in the first place. Yeah,
interspersed with short stories.
That's a good idea. Yeah. And I mean, of course, I've also got the ADHD problem of just wanting to write every book at once, and that is probably the biggest challenge. It's keeping me from keeps me from finishing any given book. And I'm trying to work on tackling that in this new year because just psychologically, it's a huge obstacle. I don't know how to writing in one series for 6 months feels like a really long time to me now, it's insane. I just need to. I think I just need to change my mindset about series fiction. How okay, I'm going to be in this series for a while. But it's not really going to take any longer. And in the past, I've taken a whole year to write one novel. And now I won't be doing that. So why am I worried about taking more than a month to write a novel,
No. Well, and here's the thing with series fiction. If you're like me, you can only stay in one series for so long before you have to go do something else. And there's a lot of good creative reasons to bounce around. For example, it refreshes your palate. It gives you a chance to practice the things that you learned in this series in a new series and learn other things that you wouldn't have learned writing this series that you can bring back. You separate that from your publishing schedule. So like if you're bouncing between 2 or 3 series, like I would know what that's like, you settle them so that you publish, you publish everything from this series for a while, then everything from this series for a while. So you're serving that audience, serving the different audiences. So your publishing schedule and your writing schedule don't have to be tied together.
That's a really good point. I definitely need to remember that. So yeah, I'm glad to get that that thought in my head early because it's important. I tend to think, okay, as soon as I'm done writing this book, I should be editing it and publishing it. But that's probably not the right way to go most of the time, actually, because I write so many diverse things.
Well, editing it and queuing it for publication.
Well, yeah, but schedule it for when there's more books ready to follow it up it's important.
Exactly, and that doing it that way also gives you time to do pre-publicity, to send it out for reviews to advanced readers or to the press, stuff like that.
Yeah. I think like the old Gunslinger Western. taking your time in a hurry. That's the thing I'm not doing very well. I'm just trying to hurry. And that has been a challenge as well.
There's that old proverb, more speed, less haste.
Yes, that's a good one. That's another one to remember. But as far as your approach goes, Dan, this is kind of a good jumping off point. Do you obviously you've had a lot of trouble writing over the last few years because of life events, right?
Yes.
But now that you're back at it, do you feel the need to go faster? Is that ever part of your feeling, or?
Oh God, yes.
Okay.
No, I've got lost time to make up for. I lost 3 years out of my life where I went from writing 5 to 6 books a year to really struggling to write 1 or 2 because the rest of life was so crazy. So, and in that time, I went from being in my late 30s to being in my early 40s, and that's a big psychological transformation. So, yeah, I've got lost time to make up for here. So I feel a lot of pressure, a lot of time pressure.
Speaking of pressure, though, does writing under pressure provide a challenge for you, or does it help you?
Yes.
Oh, both. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
It depends on. It depends on the pressure, the sort of pressure. I mean, let's see. The map is different for everybody, but everybody's got the kinds of pressure that make them focus and the kinds of pressure that make them fold. For me, diffuse low-level stress is absolutely a killer to productivity. I can't engage my creative brain when I'm under a lot of diffuse stress. Concentrated stress, where there's solvable problems, where there's identifiable things going on, where there's endpoints and deadlines, that kind of pressure is hugely, hugely beneficial because I can sit and attack things.
Well, that makes
So the kinds of stress that you get when you're dealing with emergencies from people who aren't you. Family members being sick, dying, having other problems, that sort of thing. That's diffuse stress. The kinds of stress you get when there's a extra large bill coming, or you've got a deadline that you're not going to make. That kind of stress, I love that kind of stress. It's, I can focus right down on it and really sink into the problem. And that gets my juices going.
Oh, interesting. I'm not sure if I've gotten any kind of stress to get my juices going, but definitely a more concrete kind of task to perform is helpful for me.
Yeah.
Having a goal, useful stuff. Yeah.
There's a concept advanced by Nassim Taleb called anti-fragility, which takes the very commonsensical observation that you need certain kinds of stress to be healthy. For example, you need the stress of gravity or your bones will dissolve.
Yeah.
And spins it out takes that common sense observation and spins it out to a way of approaching the universe where you're actively looking for stress of the right sort to force growth. And it's the right sort and in the right amount. So like what the kind of stress that makes me focus might be way more intense than what you're capable of dealing with in a given domain at the moment. Mm-hmm. But if you say, hey, I'd like to be able to do that, you can look and you can deliberately stress yourself in amounts that you can handle in that domain, which forces you to the muscles to get you up to the point where you can handle the kinds of high-level stress that the people who you wanted to be like in that respect are able to do.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and it's training, it's practice, muscle memory.
Yeah, it's exactly what you do if you were to be a bodybuilder, get in shape. But it applies to everything in any biological system, not just your muscles and your bones, but your attitudes, your mental fitness, your ability to think clearly, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Geez, when you started naming the mental like areas or whatever fields, I'm like, oh, I need to do all better at all those things in this coming year. So that is
everybody does. There's always room for kind of stuff for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. And I just recently, it was just in this past year, I managed to get my fatigue problem kind of dealt with because I got a CPAP machine, and I've needed one for probably a few years now.
Nice.
And
nice.
Yeah, and it really helped. Obviously, last summer I had 10,000 words in one book, and then by the time summer was over, I had finished 120,000 words in that book. And because I got the CPAP machine in June. By the end of August, I had a whole novel knocked out, and I had not finished any novels earlier in the year. So that's the kind of thing that's the kind of change getting some good sleep actually did for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I now need to just learn everything else to go with it again, kind of, because I actually have energy now. And I feel like I was operating under energy for 4 or 5 years there before that, and that's frankly devastating. Big waste of time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And at least 2 or 3 years were really serious as far as fatigue. Anyway, but it's looking up now, and that's kind of the my positive outlook that I'm trying to get now. I've always had a bad attitude, as my dad would constantly tell me when I was a kid, but I think I can work on it.
If someone accuses you of having a bad attitude, there's only one appropriate response.
What is
Go
it?
fuck yourself.
I don't think 8-year-old me would have gotten away with that.
Probably.
Yeah, but he hasn't told me that for years. It's fine, but it's definitely a formative memory I have. Because from multiple.
I think I was born with a bad attitude, and I've done everything I can to enhance it as time goes on.
Well, not to get off the rails on attitude, but what I mean by bad attitude is I just don't like doing anything when I'm feeling lousy. I don't, and it's
I just
really
don't like doing anything anyone tells me to.
See, I need to get back to that. Because I've extended the anybody to include myself, so I can't do anything.
Yeah, that's not good. That's counterproductive.
Yeah, it's exactly the wrong thing to do. But so that's kind of my mental challenge this year, is just to improve my own sense of what I want to do in some sense, in some ways, because it's just so difficult to focus on doing a novel when when half the days I wake up and I'm like, no, not doing that today. It sucks. Even if you can dictate as fast as I can dictate, you still have to do it every day, or you're not making a whole lot of progress.
Well, what are you doing to fertilize the field? In farming, you can only till the same soil so often before you have to let it fallow or spread fertilizer.
So in this case, you mean for the book? Make myself excited about the book, or prepare to dictate?
No, just generally fertilizing your mind.
Oh, okay.
The creativity is a joy instead of strip mining.
Ah, okay. Well, I've been trying to do the morning pages. I'm on and off again with the morning pages from The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, if you're familiar with that book. I'm not a huge fan of the rest of the book, but I like the morning pages a lot, and that's 3 pages written longhand. But then I start cheating after a week of doing them right. I start doing I'm just going to put a couple words on each line. I'm going to write poetry instead of prose, and that's okay for a while. But then it keeps getting degraded until I'm basically skipping half the lines. It's no good. I need to be a little more disciplined about that, because I think that really reaps benefits when I just because I think better if I did some writing first thing in the morning.
Yep.
And but it feels like a drag sometimes too, because this is going to take.
Well, there's that.
Minutes.
So that's it. Analogously speaking, that's you need 2 things, right? You need your exercise and you need your nutrition. That's your exercise.
Okay.
What's your nutrition?
I don't really know. Are you thinking?
What's the last?
Go on.
Well, what's the last time you read something that blew your world open?
Oh, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Not to speak ill of anybody, but I've been a little bit disappointed by most of the books I've read lately. Yeah.
Well,
that's kind of my state, but that's kind of my state.
90%.
Yeah.
Right. So not just, but I don't mean just fiction. I mean nonfiction too. When was the last time you read something that, or that made you look at something about the world, anything about the world, from a different angle, so that you were forced to open up in order to cope with it?
Wow. That's a good question. I'm going to have to look for ways to do that. It's been a long time. I can hardly remember, and that's no good.
Yeah.
I guess when it comes to fiction, when it comes to fiction, there was some technique stuff in a recent short story I read, or it was a novella that I read on, I think it was by Dean Koontz. Yeah. And that was pretty good. I mean, it was pretty interesting because I wasn't used to reading for the present tense always reminds me of itself. And that always makes me think more about the writing when I'm reading a story like that. And it was it was a present tense story, which...
Greg Iles' standalone thrillers use present tense to great effect.
Yeah, this was also Dean Koontz, obviously, so this was a thriller too. Yeah. And it was pretty interesting how that worked. But it was the first in a big series of thriller novellas that he's got on Amazon now. And but it was like 60 pages long, very quick read. And maybe not even a novella. I'm not going to split hairs about what it was, though.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah. Part of my daily routine, even more important for me than writing, is being exposed to something, whether it's fiction or art or music or nonfiction, that forces me to reach a little ways outside my body.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Keeps the creative juices flowing.
Yeah, so could you repeat that last bit? Because you broke up a tiny bit for me.
That keeps the creative juices flowing.
Not that part. So the part where you said you try to reach something to get outside of your
bubble.
Right, okay.
We've all got a bubble, right?
Yes.
The picture of, or as I call it in the book that I'm working on, about autodidacticism, we all got a glass box that we mistake for the world.
Mm-hmm.
We can see through the walls, so we think that what we see is real. But anytime you look through a pane of glass, there's a distortion. And so I'm always looking for things that force me to shatter a piece of that glass box and reach through it.
Yeah. No, I can think of some times where that's happened to me. That's definitely... So I need to reach back. I need to go and try to find more ways to do that. Yeah, okay. That sounds like a good idea, frankly, because I'm at a loss as to how to discover, fiction in a way. Discover my own preferences. That's the thing I've noticed. Like, I don't know what I really like anymore. Has been a common complaint I've had lately, the past couple of years. I'm bored with most of the stuff I read, even the stuff that's in the stuff I used to like, that kind of thing.
Well, try reading something from a different generation.
Okay.
One of the things that's happened in the last 30 years, the internet has homogenized a lot of communication. So you don't get the kinds of regional variance, you don't get the kinds of variance by educational levels in worldview that you used to get just walking around town.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a writer that stands out in the crowd, you need to be drinking from a different trough than everybody else is. You still want to drink from the regular trough occasionally so you can keep in touch with what people are reading and what they're interested in, because that's good for marketing and stuff. And because people come up, writers today have amazing levels of craft, because every generation builds on the tricks of the last generation. But in terms of stuff that makes you sit up and take notice because it's unusual, look to different generations, read the classics, read stuff from the 19th century, read stuff from the 20th century from different genres than you've read before, with different writers than you've read before. Anything where because you're using the writer as a lens to look at humanity, you're looking through a different lens than you normally would.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah, I'll have to do that. That's got to go on the menu too. And I'm looking around. I'm like, yeah, I have a lot of books like that. I should just break one open, crack one. All right. And so we're running a bit low on time, but thanks for being on the show, Dan. It's good to chat with you always.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And before we go though, let's let the readers know where they can find a book or two of yours. Let's say you have so many.
Well, I suppose the two things I want to shine a light on: my Clark Lantham mystery series, which is set in the San Francisco Bay Area over the last 10 years or so, and is deeply connected to the way the culture in the Bay Area has changed. And you've got characters in there that are biohackers and steampunks and venture capitalists, and you can really get into the underbelly of the Bay Area in a way that's really fun and with a voice that is extremely dark and very humorous, and very twisty. Everyone tells me how they just can't. It's always so. That's usually a good thing for mystery readers. Mm-hmm. The Clark Lantham mysteries, starting with "And Then She Was Gone," you'll love them. And the other one, if you want gonzo crazy, is the Suave Rob's Awesome Adventures series, starting off with Suave Rob's Double X Daring Do. This is a far future transsexual Evel Knievel type of public stunt exhibition guy who surfs supernovas, he skin dives the Marianas Trench, who skydives from orbit, does all sorts of wacky stuff in the name of holding up a finger against the universe, which is trying to kill humans.
And they're real fun. Yes, definitely fun books.
And they are real fun. And if you're interested in my nonfiction, since we have been talking a lot about learning and stuff like that, the place to go is my podcast, The Everyday Novelist, at everydaynovelist.com. The kind of stuff we've been talking about here today is this talk about all day, every day, for 10 to 20 minutes of the show.
Yeah. And again, love that podcast. So, keep up the good work there. I'll keep sending in questions as long as you keep answering. Yes.
Fantastic.
And, well, in batches, though, because that's how I operate. Okay, so, so as for this podcast, you can find us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can find my books at amazon.com. And that's really about it. Oh, yeah, and currently I have Demon Scroll is currently out, and that's the first book in the Demon Hunter series. That's epic fantasy. Think The Witcher meets Mistborn into those books. And thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for being on the show, Dan. Happy New Year. And I'll trail off.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's been great. Thanks for listening, everybody. Talk to you next week.
That tears it.